All right, welcome back to another tutorial in Maya. Okay, today we're going to sort of make a smoke kind of trail thingy, whatever you want to call it, a smoke thing, a smoke bomb, just something that looks like this, a vaporous ghost, I don't know. You could do a ton of stuff with this, and here's the render. At least this is what I'm getting, so far. And yeah, it looks pretty cool. So it's basic smoke basics, and what I want to do is walk you through the process today of some smoke basics. So, okay, let's take a look at where I'm at so far in the scene. Right here is this frame, and it's basically a 3D fluid container with a an emitter going through it. And here's what it looks like on the render. All right, so you have a pretty good idea of what we can do with this. Now, check this out. On the render, a lot of times when you're dealing with 3D fluids and stuff, you want to check your alpha right here. Okay, so I'm in the render view, and I'm just looking at the various color options. Here's my color, and here is my alpha. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means that, essentially these are going to be used in a comp somewhere along the way. So you're going to, take these out of Maya and, move them into After Effects or Nuke or some other program. Okay. So essentially that's all this is. It's just a smoke effect. And I kind of want to show you how to go about putting this together. And just sort of playing around with some of the controls to get some basic smoke effects under your belt. Okay. But first, while I was rummaging around on the internet, I ran across this guy, Mark Spevik, who is a really good instructor, really great. And he works over here at Escape Studios. He's like one of the head honchos over there. Okay? And if you go to escapestudios.com, you can go into their e-learning section, and there is all sorts of free tutorials. And so you might find that interesting. But in this case, you'll find a really cool tutorial called Simulating Dry Ice with Maya Fluids. Okay? And Mark delivers this tutorial, and it's top notch. Okay? So get over there and check out Mark. You're going to have to sign up. You sign in and, give them your email and stuff. But basically, they have lots of great stuff over there and tutorials on a monthly that they release for free and really cool people over there. So if you're in the UK, you're close by. If you're here in the States, they do have e-learning. Cool. All right. So, hey, we send out Mark a Deep Fried Ectoplasm Award of Excellence in Education. Okay, so there you go. Go check him out. And check out Lester Banks every day. LesterBanks.com. Good stuff for your brain. So the first thing you want to do is just create a new scene, something like what we got here. And if you go to your Dynamics menu set, if you go into your Dynamics right there, you're going to notice you have Fluid Effects here and Create 3D Container with Emitter. Or you can find it right over here in your General tabs, and there it is right there. So I'm just going to click on that. And I basically get a container to start out with an emitter inside. And if I hit play, I'm going to set this animation to something more realistic, like say, let's just do 300 frames. I don't know. And I'm going to go back to the beginning and hit play. By default, I'm seeing, some vapor. Now, you might be set to, let's see, you might just be seeing little tiny sprites come out of there, or little tiny, so hit 6 on your keyboard so you can see it as a fluid. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play right here. And there it is. It's emitting a fluid. I'm going to come in here a little bit more, just like we think it should. Now, let's do a couple of things right away to the emitter, okay? Because that's what's emitting, inside of this fluid. So let's come over to our tabs, click Fluid Emitter, and let's look at some of these basic attributes. Right now, it's at 100%, and it's an omni emitter, and that's cool. We can just leave that at default. And let's take a look at our fluid attributes, okay? So overall, I think that in this case, we have a density of 1, but I'm going to just go to, say, something like 4.5 or something like that, and just set the density up a little bit. And I'm going to go back to the beginning, give it a quick play, and you can see we have pretty good density in there. Everything's rolling along good. It's got, it's doing its thing. Okay, so no big deal there. The more you put here, the more you're going to see. If I switch this density down to say something like 0.5, go back and play out, it's going to be quite a bit less dense overall. About all you can say. So anyway, actually, that wasn't even at 1. Let's put this at 1 and hit enter. Go back to the beginning. All right. So there it is. Okay, no big deal, density. Let's move on to, let's give it a resolution and a size. But first, we're going to look at this heat level right here. And we have a density of say, like, I'm going to give it a density of 4.5. And I'm going to set this heat to something more like 3. We'll give it a little more heat, okay? I think I'll leave the fuel at 1, and we'll do a fluid drop-off at 2. And in this case, you can deselect the jitter if you want. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to sort of bring this up. And because my fluid, I want to give it a little bit more room, I'm going to go into the actual fluid shape here now for a minute. And I'm going to correct its size. Now, never use your scale tool to size this up from over here, okay? It's tempting, but don't do it, because Maya really wants to know what the size is through these values right here, okay? So my base resolution, I could up that a little bit more. I think I'll just set it at like 40 to start out. And the size, I think I'll go like, say something like 40, 20, and 20. And we'll just leave everything like that for a minute. I'll go back to the beginning, do another quick render, and there it is. We get a little bit more room up there. But remember, we're going to make this emitter kind of cruise through this fluid container, okay? So this emitter, anytime it's within this fluid container, it's working. If it's on the outside, it is not going to work, okay? So just a simple concept. Now, let's go back here and take a look at this jitter option. I'm going to go back to the fluid emitter, and we're going to take a look at the jitter. I'm going to see if we can see the jitter. You can see right there where, I don't know if YouTube shows this very well, but there's a little bit of jitter going on right down here. And you can see it kind of vacillating back and forth from the emitter. And so if you come up here and just uncheck your jitter, that's kind of what's going to affect that. Now I'll go back and hit play, and I can see a much smoother sort of emission right down here. Okay, so no big deal. That's the jitter. Okay, so we'll leave that off for the moment. I'm going to come back out here, and let's go back into our fluid shape and do a few more adjustments. Now, there's a ton of variables down here, and right now, one of the most important section is contents details. And we'll look at this display here for a second really quick, okay? So basically, we want to switch up the dynamic simulation right here first. And, you know, most of these are our starting default qualities, which is cool. We may want to switch a few of these up, like, say, the dampening. Now, this is just going to dampen the effect overall a little bit as far as what we have now. So I'm going to go ahead and hit damping, all right? And I'm going to put that at, to say, like 0.015 or something like that, just to kind of give it a little tiny bit of dampening. And I also want to come up here and I want to set everything to dynamic grid, even temperature, okay? Right now temperature is set to off, so I could set that to dynamic grid on, or I could come down here and I can look at my various options in my fluid shape. Let's see if we can get to our fluid shape. Where did we go? Well, we'll go to contents methods and go to temperature dynamic grid. We want to turn the dynamic grid on right there, okay? And yeah, everything looks pretty good. And we'll just leave that there. And let's do another quick look at it. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the animation and take another look. Okay, so that pretty much is getting there. It's not quite what we want yet, but it should do. Okay, So let's take a look at a couple more properties here under the dynamic simulation. Basically, there is you can set your substeps up or your solver quality up to get a few more better quality in your renders, which is okay. You might want to put your high detail solve onto all grids right here, because this sets the solver to all of your grids, okay, within this contents method. So, technically these are all on. The solver is going to calculate everything. Okay, so that's about it for that. Now let's look down in contents details. Take a look at our density first. Our density scale is at 0.5 by default, buoyancy at 1. Well, I want to sort of take away the buoyancy on the scale right there. I'll go back to the beginning, hit play, and you can see by changing the buoyancy, it really is affecting, kind of the overall, what that emitter is doing. It's not letting the liquid rise, or, it's not, having as much of an effect. Okay, so I'm going to leave it like that. I'll go back to the beginning, and we'll take a look at the dissipation. The dissipation, we want to give it a little bit of dissipation just so that our fluid doesn't sort of want to creep up onto the ceiling of this 3D container. Okay, so dissipation, I'm going to set to say like 0.35 or something like that. I'll go back, and we'll go back and just sort of see what that looks like. You can see it's moving a little bit slower. It's having some dissipation. It's not quite reaching out as far as it was before. So yeah, it's starting to get there. Okay? So we'll just leave it like that for the moment. I'm going to go ahead and hit pause, go back to the beginning, and let's look at a couple of other things here. Our contents details are pretty much done. Now we want to look at velocity. And in this velocity, you can always add a little bit of swirl. Now watch what happens if I just add an extreme amount of swirl. You can see where our fluid here is starting to expand out and go all over the place. And, it sort of reaches a swirl-like state, okay? So that's the first thing to sort of be aware of after you get like a basic emitter set up like this. I'm going to go ahead and hit pause. And we'll go back to the beginning, and I'm going to take my swirl back down to, I think I'll just take it down to like, say, 0.3. I'll add a little bit, but not much, okay? And that's about it. Now, let's look at turbulence. Turbulence right here, we're going to want to sort of make a few adjustments to turbulence, because turbulence sort of adds all of those interesting kind of nuances to the way the smoke moves, okay? So I'm going to set the strength to say like 1.4, something like that. Just sort of lower it a bit. And the frequency we could set to about like say 0.6 or something like that. It's at 0.2 by default. So let's just raise that frequency up a little bit. And we'll give it a speed of say like 0.2 is fine at default. All right. Now let's look at temperature, and let's change a few things there. Temperature scale by default is at 1. Buoyancy is at 3. Now, in this case, without getting too complicated on temperature buoyancy, let's just say let's lower this to a little bit lower value of 2. All right? Just something to begin with there. Dissipation, I can sort of, there's a pressure and pressure threshold. Don't worry about those so much at the moment. They have a lot to do with other things. Okay, but dissipation, we want to set this at say 1. Okay, and diffusion, we can leave it 0. Let's put diffusion at 0. Dissipation is at 1. Diffusion's at 0. And turbulence, well, in this section we can just leave it at 0.1. We'll just sort of leave those at default. Okay, now let's take a look at what happened when we did all those. I'm going to go ahead and sort of, do a render. Okay, well, there's what it looks like in really low resolution. And if I do a quick render on that at the moment, which I want to kind of stay away from doing renders, you'll see where it really doesn't look all that good. I mean, it looks horrible, really. Okay, go back to the drawing board. All right. Well, we could do one of two things. Remember that we're just sort of setting this up, and our resolution is really low right now. I mean, we've got a base resolution of 40. So if I kick that up to a higher value, it's going to look a lot better. But it's also going to make playback and sort of getting this set up a lot slower, okay? So just remember that. So let's leave it at 40 at the moment, and let's go ahead and keyframe this so that it sort of moves through the scene like we thought it would. I'll look in this fluid and I'll look for this emitter, and there it is in the outliner. And I may want to just move the emitter over a bit. So like I'll start it from the outside here, and we're going to move it and keyframe it so it goes all the way through, okay? So I'll sort of set this up, and we'll take a look at where this emitter is at, and here's all of its coordinates. So we might as well just hit S on the keyboard, or you can hit set keyframe. I'm just going to set keyframe on all of these values, and then I'm going to move it forward all the way to the end. And because I have interactive playback set down here, I can just sort of move it all the way through, and this should set my last keyframe. And because interactive keyframe gives you that, it just leaves off where you left off. So there it is, okay? So now, if I play the animation, I see I'm starting to get something that I like. Looks pretty good, only in terms of, hey, it's moving through there and it's sort of doing what I would expect it to do. But it doesn't look quite right yet. Okay? So let's go back to the beginning. Let's do a few more adjustments. Go ahead and let this play out a little bit. And I'll sort of stop it in the middle here. Okay? And let's do a quick render and see what that looks like. There's a render. Looks awful. Okay? So let's do this. Let's select the render settings from right here and come over, and in the common section, let's make that a little bit larger. I think I'll do mine at like 720. And I think I might switch my quality right here in Mental Ray up to production quality. All right, that should give me a lot better look. And I'll go ahead and do another render. And there it is. Okay, that looks pretty ugly. Okay, so that's okay. I'll go ahead and take a look at what the overall looks like after I up the resolution. So I'm going to take this base resolution and say do it at like, I don't know, let's just try 400. Okay, that might be a little extreme, and it might not be necessary. And there it is. But what we have to do here first is set some of these parameters for the shading on the fluid. Right here you can see where it's all white. I see a little bit of incandescent value coming through here. So it's easy enough to fix. What we need to look at first, before we do anything, is we're going to come into the shading section and we're going to look at transparency. Okay? And I want to look at that transparency and sort of bring it down a bit into the almost black. And if you're looking at your color history here, it's at about like 0.044. I could bring that up a little bit, something like that. And then the color is at all white. And technically we should have sort of a mid-gray on that color. All right, and we could even move that color down a little bit by changing its value right here. Just slide that down a little bit. Okay, so now it looks a lot more like what we would expect we'd be seeing. I'll go back to the beginning of the animation here. Yeah, that is if I don't crash. Okay, so we'll go back to the beginning. I'm going to hit play. And you can see where, because I have 400 chosen as my resolution, my computer just about freezes up and dies. Okay, and I got a pretty good Mac tower. So I'm going to hit escape there, and I want to come back up here, and I want to look at this base resolution. Maybe set that back down to something more reasonable, like 40. Okay, and I'll go back to the beginning, and we'll play this animation. Now you can see where by default it has, it has some values. It has a little bit of incandescence. Yeah, and it's kind of doing what we would think it would be doing as it passed through here. All right, so let's take a look at that real quick. Obviously, this resolution is not going to be very good for rendering out, but it's going to be pretty good for doing what we're doing. I might take this base resolution up to 80 just to sort of see what happens with the overall look, because you're going to be using your viewport a lot to kind of establish, you know, a preliminary pictures, if you will. All right, so there it is. It's looking better at a higher resolution. So I'm going to leave it like that. And I'm going to hit escape on the keyboard. And let's take a look at the shading. The shading you can see right down here in the incandescent level. We can switch this up. If I bring this up over here toward these, I'm getting a hotter, kind of a more extreme in between red and yellow. If I bring it all the way down, I'm getting more of an extreme between black and red. Okay? So that's something to be aware of. We're working with the temperature scale here. So I'll bring it up to kind of like right about there. And remember, you can always move these around a little bit. And now we can sort of have the ability to change its colors kind of like this. Now, I had my colors set where I just switched up the red by choosing the red color there to something more like a green, or maybe it was a blue. Yeah, I think it was like a blue. And then this top color, I set a red, or I mean a kind of a mid-green. And I think I had a white value in there as well. Okay. So if you just click inside of this shading group here, or this ramp, I'll put a white in there, and yeah. So now you see where you can get a lot of different variants in your color, in your palette right there. So that's kind of cool. Now, if I were to do a render of this right now, it still would look horrible because we dropped it down to like a resolution of 80. But this is sort of the time when you would look at what you're doing here and say, yeah, I want to raise that up to, say, something more like 160, and just start small in raising up your overall resolution. And I'm going to go ahead and save that one. And there it is. Okay, so let's see, between the last one and this one, there's not that much difference. And sometimes in rendering, you might have to keep going back to the beginning and then just doing a re-render. Now you can see where it's moving a lot slower since I moved it up to 160. All right. Yeah, it's moving a lot slower. So we'll let that play out for just a couple of frames here. And then we'll take a look at a couple of properties dealing with opacity of this various fluid, or the shading of the fluid emitter. All right, so that's going like really slow. I have about a 4-second average per render on something like this per frame. So you might kind of be looking to get the same. Or if you're on a slower computer, it could be 6 to 8 minutes per. So if you keep your frame numbers down here, you'll be better off. No 3,000 frame fluid effects rendering on your MacBook Pro. Okay? All right, well, I'm going to stop it right there by hitting escape. And let's just sort of look at this a little closer. There we go. I'm going to come down here into the shading section and show you something. A lot of this is controlled by opacity. And if I click in this ramp a couple of times, I can set a few more points that are going to help me sort of vary the opacity overall. Yeah, so by just having a ramp here and moving these around a little bit, you'll have a lot greater control over. You'll have a lot greater control over what your fluid looks like. Okay, so remember that. In this case, I'll go ahead and just sort of stick with this ramp, and I'm going to switch this white color. I'm going to switch that up to something a little more vibrant, like say maybe something that fits more within the palette, like that. And I think I'll take this down a little bit. And remember, you can now use your opacity slider to sort of move around, and it's going to pick up more of what's in the range that the slider is set at here. Okay, so there you go. And remember, if I take this blue and move it to the outside, it's going to reverse where it is inside of the shading group there. Okay, so you can sort of play around with that. I mean, nothing is ever going to be perfectly correct because, hey, that's half the fun of it. Okay, well, I hope this hasn't gotten too complicated, and play around with all these controls. Now, another thing that makes a big difference is the self-shadowing. When you turn self-shadowing on, it sort of gives a directional lighting through here, which gives everything a little bit better look. And if I go ahead and do a render on that, I'm getting something like that. I may want to sort of adjust my temperature at this point and say, well, I want to bring this down a little bit there, and I want to bring this a little bit less there, and do another render. Okay, so completely different look, but you get the picture. So now it's just a matter of playing around with all of these controls. You can kind of come up here and say, an interesting thing is if we make this auto resize, for example. Okay, so like here it is at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and sort of take this back down to 40. All right, and that'll help me sort of visualize things, at a lower resolution. It's much better to work in a lower res. Okay, so there's my trail cruising through there. But watch this. We can speed up our render time a little bit more by just coming down, and we can look at our auto resize right here. And if you turn that on, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, and I'm going to go back to the beginning of the animation. Okay, you can see where basically the fluid size of the box is just resizing itself to, sort of include this fluid. All right, and nothing else. So it's not calculating so much information. So that's cool. Now, that'll speed up your rendering time and let you get a better kind of overall idea of what's going on. Now, if you don't want this box visible, you can always click on this and come down into, let's see, what we want to do is we want to come into, where are we at? Auto resize. We want to go to the boundary draw, and it's right here. Boundary draw is underneath your display, and if you want to, right now it's set at bottom, which sort of means that we have this whole bounding box chosen, and I'm going to go ahead and select none. Okay, and now that just sort of hid the bounding box for this resolution. Okay, or I mean for this simulation. There you go. Okay, so now it's just a matter of sort of, outputting this. Make sure you set your resolution up, and then just output this as an image sequence to whatever you want. So resolution is your friend at this point, and I'm going to do a quick render just to see what we have here. This is a low resolution, and it pretty much matches. You can see where it doesn't look so good, but let's say we add a 0 to here. I'm going to click on there, and I'll do another quick render and see if I can get a higher resolution. All right, yeah, it's a little bit better, but not much. Yeah, so just be careful with your resolution because it's going to add a lot of time to your your render time. So there you go. All right. So hey, I hope this hasn't been too long. I hope you learned something. And as always, be a good person. Read a book every once in a while, preferably the owner's manual for Maya or whatever program you're studying. And hey, thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next one. There you go.